Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. It is the 12th of March 2019. It is a Tuesday. And tonight's topic, gold and silver rise on another failed Brexit vote. We're going to get into the gold and silver prices, get into a little of the Brexit news, some crypto news, and a couple of other things. Today I did an interview with Sean at SGT Report. I think it was pretty entertaining. It's probably not what Sean expected. He asked me a couple of, I think what he thought were softball leading questions about why is the gold-silver ratio so out of whack, to which I replied, I don't think it is. And then he said something about, well, why is JP Morgan stacking all that silver if silver isn't valuable? And I said, I don't think that JP Morgan is stacking silver. So I wouldn't say it went downhill from there. I think it was a good conversation. I think Sean appreciated the fact that I was trying to explain why for the last 10 years silver has gone nowhere. Just insisting that there's all these facts that are out there that would indicate silver should be higher. Well, you would think after 10 years someone might have figured that out and pushed it higher. And you can't just explain it all on manipulation, although we did talk about that as well. We brought up the relative rarity argument. So it was quite an interesting conversation. Took about a half an hour. Should be up tomorrow night. So when it comes out, please go take a look at that. Maybe give it a thumbs up and leave a comment. There will be people, I'm sure, from the SGT contingent that probably did want to hear what I had to say about silver. But again, I'm not against silver. And as you guys know, because many of you purchase silver directly from the links below this BitChute and this YouTube and on the Smaulgld site, I'm not against silver. I just try to explain why silver is not skyrocketing and why the gold-silver ratio is where it is. And I think even Sean conceded. He said, well, that sounds like as good of an explanation as any. And again, if I can, rather than argue with me, I mean, it's not like the points I'm making. You could say, yeah, but silver is rarer than gold, and yeah, but the gold-silver ratio should be lower. And my but it isn't. So you explain to me why it isn't, not why my explanation for why it isn't. And here, what these people do is they try to explain to you why silver should be higher. I say, okay, and you say that every year, and it doesn't go higher. So what's the reason? I guess they don't think that deeply about it. All right, let's see what happened in our gold and silver prices. So we'll look at the gold and silver price, and we'll talk about this Brexit thing, because this is the second time now that a Brexit deal has been voted on and told no. Now, the people that they're not voting against Brexit, meaning, well, they're not voting for Brexit not to happen. They're voting for Brexit not to happen on the terms that have been negotiated with the EU. So it's not like today's vote was 391 to 242. That doesn't mean that 391 members of parliament want out of Brexit, out of the UK, out of Europe, and that they want Brexit. It means they don't want Brexit on these terms. And we'll get into what it all is going to mean, or what might happen as a result of these votes. But let's take a look at what happened with the gold and silver prices today. Now, the first time when it looked like Brexit was going to be a reality, back in 2016, we saw some significant rises in the price of gold and silver. In fact, silver got as high as $20 an ounce back in the summer of 2016. Gold got up to about $13.50 and then fell back down again. Now today, after they rejected the deal, it went up a little bit, but it's still only up $7 today. It did recapture the $1,300 mark back there. As I mentioned, the gold price up $7 to $1,300. That's where it is right now at $1,300, up 5.55%. And that gold price had, the first time we heard wind that Brexit was happening, it really went up. Same with silver, got up to $20 an ounce. Now that we've rejected for the second time, not we, but the British Parliament's rejected for the second time the terms and conditions for leaving the EU. The next move, I think, is March 29th, I believe, is the date. That if they don't have a deal, then they just leave, and that's called a hard Brexit. However, it looks like now what they might vote on again, I think tomorrow or next week, very soon, they're going to vote whether just to say to hell with all this and we're out on the 29th, or to delay the Brexit. And you see, this then is why they're probably going to have a big protest on the 29th, because you can probably bet they're not just going to say, yep, that's it, we tried, we couldn't do it, we're out of here. I think there's a guy, we'll get to him in a minute, who is saying that 500 of the MPs out of like the 700, they're not for Brexit, even though it should be something more like 50-50, and it's not. So the political class, even at the lower level, the member of the MPs, just like our Congress, they're not for Brexit the same way the population is for Brexit. And the population is for Brexit 52-48. It's not a commanding majority, but it is a majority. It was a majority when they took the vote in 2016. So there's your gold price. Now silver had a little bit better day. Second time in the past few days that silver's done slightly better than gold on an up day. Got up to about 15.34, so it is holding above that $15 mark, and after briefly flirting with a 14 handle. But right now silver also is about where it closed, a little higher. It's at 15.40 right now, and that's up about a nickel, so it's not that much. So it actually didn't go up as much as gold did. And the gold silver ratio, we'll just take a quick look. Yeah, at one point it was down, but silver sold off at the end of the day a bit, and now the gold silver ratio is still 84-85 to 1. In other gold and news stories, we did have now remember, Newmont Mining, number 2 miner, has agreed to merge with Goldcore, the 4th largest miner, and that was announced last month. And then October, November last year, Barrick's, the number 1 miner, had agreed to buy Rand Gold. And then after Barrick saw Newmont buy Goldcore, they said, well, maybe we should buy Newmont. And then I think they wanted to make a bid. It looks like, let me get further details, they might do a joint venture. Now, sometimes joint ventures are just that, joint ventures. They agree to pool their resources on some projects. Other times, joint ventures, and they last for a specific period of time. Other times, they could lead to a merger. I haven't managed to look at the papers yet, but it does show, again, a lot of consolidation in the gold mining area. And that's largely because certain mines, like in South Africa, they're already producing at a average cost of production above the gold price. Most gold miners, however, where they're operating mines, they're operating below the cost of production, anywhere between $800 and $1,200 an ounce. But in order to squeeze more profit out, they need to work better the mines that are at the low cost, and they also need to lower their costs. They can't do anything about the price, really, other than maybe holding back some production. But what they really need to do is to pool their resources. There's a lot of legal, accounting, exploration, payoffs, bribes, whatever they have to do. So many different jurisdictions. It really is a large undertaking. It's not just digging out of the ground. It's then there's hedging. There's the amount of production they can do in a given year. They sometimes have to pay fines. It really is. You have to be a really good manager to manage a mining company. You can't just, it's not a simple business, and there's a lot of expenses. And obviously, the larger the company, the more easily they can spread them across different projects. So I think that's what's going on here. And this probably, unless there's any new innovation in mining, will probably mean lower production as mines try to become more cost effective rather than just trying to produce more gold. Unless, again, if the price were to rise significantly, well, then they might start looking at some mines that may have higher cost of production and start to exploit them. So we'll keep track of the gold miners as we go forward. See what happens there. Anything else? Yeah, so let's get to Brexit here because it's important, because if there's a hard Brexit, that might mean, and it may happen, but it looks like the way the EU has their mitts in this thing and the way most of the parliament doesn't want a hard Brexit, even though that's what the voters voted for. We don't have a deal by the 29th of March. We're out of here. But that's probably unlikely, but we'll see what happens. Claude Juncker, who's this head of the EU in some respects, he met with Theresa May, and he said we've got meaningful and clarification, legal guarantees, and so on. And it's either this deal or Brexit may not happen at all. Isn't that interesting? The guy in the EU telling Brexit, you can't do what you said you were going to do unless you do it this way. Now, that's not really what the case is. But in reality, it may be what the case is, because what may happen is they reject this deal, then they vote and they say, well, we're not going to vote for a hard Brexit. Well, then they've effectively said there's no Brexit. They'll say, we'll delay it until we get another deal. And then I'll have to go back to Juncker, and he can just say no, no, no. And unless the British Parliament decides, okay, we're just going to leave then, which they don't appear willing to do, then they'll just stay the way they are and they'll be in limbo. So in a way, unless, this is the old negotiation, unless you're willing to walk away and say, yeah, we will leave without a deal, then the EU has them where they want them. And they'll keep putting back deals in front of them that they'll reject, but realizing that Britain is going to be in limbo for a long time unless they either leave or they take a deal that's acceptable. And so far, they don't seem to be able to get a deal that's acceptable. And it sounds like now that the EU doesn't want to give them anything that they would deem as acceptable. So that was Juncker saying it's either this deal or no deal. And then Theresa May went back, and she sounds really bad. She's got a hoarse voice. I guess she's either talking too much or she's just got a horrific cold from being overworked. And there she is sitting with Juncker. And it turned out today, just a few hours ago, that, sorry mate, not going to happen. Theresa May's Brexit deal has been rejected by MPs in the House of Commons. There you go then. 391 to 242. I watched it live. Here, they said. And Theresa May was defeated. Overwhelmingly rejects Theresa May's Brexit deal. It's the second time they rejected her by these large numbers. Interestingly enough, though, the party did not vote to get rid of her the last time they had the no confidence vote. Now, the other interesting thing is that she's really a Remainer. She's like the caretaker for Brexit, but she doesn't really want it to happen. So she's probably not the person to lead it. But as I mentioned, this guy here, Jacob Rees-Mogg, a Brexiter, he makes the point, as I mentioned earlier, 52% of voters voted to leave, but probably 500 out of 650 MPs voted to remain. So he's calling it a historic disconnect of voters. We'll watch what happens. Now, what will that mean for the price of gold? I think a hard Brexit, probably good for a bit of movement in both the gold and silver. But I don't know if we're going to get that. So, again, it's something you've got to watch play by year. Now, mentioning when I was on a SGT report, let's give you a few charts here. We did talk about gold reserves, and central banks are buying gold. And that is all I need to know. We did talk about that. Just give you some quick updates here on central banks. People used to say that all the time, but it wasn't central banks. It was really only Russia and Kazakhstan. But now there are lots of central banks that are buying gold, and we talked about those. Here's the big ones that are buying the last few months: China, Turkey, Argentina. But we've also seen buying now from Iran, Iraq, Poland, Hungary. There's a bunch of countries now that hadn't been buying gold that are now adding to their gold reserves. And then I'll just show you some charts I put together today. You got the PBOC the last 3 months now buying gold, December, January, and February. They've added about a total of 30 tons of gold. They were at 1,842 tons for the longest time. And in December, they started buying gold again, adding about 10 tons a month. So they're at 1,874. Russia, we talk about all the time. They add every month. In fact, they should be coming out with theirs in about a week. They're February numbers, but here are their numbers through January, they were 2,118 tons. You can see a steady, inexorable rise in their gold reserves. And the one that buys gold every month for the last 77 months is Kazakhstan. There you see they're 353 tons, up from 198 tons back in January 2015. And the Reserve Bank of India is getting in on the mix now for the first time in about a decade. You can see here they were at 557 tons for the longest time. They did buy in 2009. At one point earlier in the 2000s, they had sold off some of their gold or lent it and then forfeited, I think. But you can see in 2018, they started adding gold, and they added some more gold in 2019. All right, so let's roll that all up into the top 20. Check out what we got here. And there you go. United States is the only, when they list gold reserves by country, those gold reserves are not at the Central Bank of the United States, because the Central Bank of the United States is not owned by the United States. It is a private bank called the Federal Reserve. The rest of these central banks are indeed branches of the Treasury or some branch of the government itself. And Germany has 3,370 tons, Italy 2,450, and there you can see China and Russia moving up the charts from 1,800 and 2,100 tons. Switzerland down to 1,040. They used to have 2,000 tons of gold. They sold in the early 2000s when they joined the IMF. Netherlands looks like it's about to be overtaken by India at 607. If India continues just to add incremental few tons here and there, they should blow past the Netherlands. Now, the Netherlands has repatriated a good portion of their gold a couple years ago. We covered that, but they didn't add any new gold. That seemed to have been the thing that a lot of countries are doing. Germany repatriated but didn't add. Netherlands repatriated but didn't add. I believe Belgium and Austria also did some repatriation but didn't add any new gold. But it looks like India is now adding new gold. So the countries adding gold are India, China, Russia, but none of the Western European countries. We saw Poland add gold, but they're not in the top 20. And there you can see Kazakhstan coming into view there. Now looking at Portugal with 380 tons, and then Taiwan with, I think it's 424 tons, and the ECB. And you can see the United Kingdom used to have also a lot of gold, but they sold a good portion of it in early 2000s by then Chancellor of the Exchequer, Gordon Brown, called Brown's Bottom because he sold it at like $300 or 200 pounds an ounce. And they only have 310 tons. And yep, that's it. That's it on your central banks are buying gold. Now, the other thing I covered today with Sean and SGT report is the central bank buying used to be about 7-8% of overall gold demand. It's now about 10 to 12%. So it's getting to be a relatively significant number. The big driver of gold the last 50 years has been jewelry. Jewelry is about 53% of overall gold demand in 2017. And then from there you had investment demand from private individuals, and then about 30%, and then you had about 10 some odd percent for central banks, and then after that you have some industrial demand for gold. All right, what else do we have today after we get past the gold news? Cryptocurrencies. Let's talk about them today. Let's look at the prices. So Bitcoin right now, a bit flat for a while. It's like 3,863. That's flat. Ethereum at $133. That's flat. Litecoin up almost 3% to 56.50, and Bcash down to 127.69. That's pretty much flat as well. Interesting stories here. Venezuela. Now remember, we talked about the other day how Venezuela had set up a page, somewhat of a payment processor remittance page, where you can send Bitcoin and Litecoin into Venezuela. It's the way of getting around capital controls, getting around the SWIFT system. And immediately after they put that up, they had the blackout. Now, why would they have a blackout? Well, I speculated today on SGT report was because Venezuela has been mining a lot of Bitcoin and Litecoin. Well, guess what you can't do when the electricity goes out? You can't mine Bitcoin and Litecoin. So now you're cutting them off there. It's like a blockade. if indeed the United States or some foreign entity hostile to Venezuela did somehow manage to attack the grid, well, you've attacked their ability to make money, which is to mine Bitcoin and Litecoin. You've also attacked their ability to transact, because while you can transact Bitcoin or Litecoin when the lights are out, if you have batteries, eventually you need to recharge the batteries. So it's quite possible that that is an act, or it just could be a coincidence. You decide. Venezuelan economist says cryptocurrency is good, it's bueno. Bolivars, no, they're not. And that's what the government is saying too. So they're saying send us Bitcoin and Litecoin, but no send the Bolivars. There you go. Venezuela. All right. What else do we got? Hester Prynne, or Hester Pierce, one of the SEC commissioners. She's a real free market libertarian here. Crypto markets should self-regulate when possible. She's all for the Bitcoin ETF as well. They call her Crypto Mom. I call her Hester Prynne, only because of the scarlet letter, and I saw her once in a red dress, but her name, indeed, is Hester Pierce. And finally, in cryptocurrency world, Swiss quote bank launching new nuke-proof crypto custody. Amazing that they actually have to lock this stuff down like it was gold, but that's apparently what they're doing. Custodial service. They will keep your crypto keys stored in an ex-military bunker. All right. What else do we have? Now, the Mueller thing, we're wondering what's going to happen, whether he's going to release his probe, what's going to happen. I would say that he's going to release it, but we're not going to find out much about it, and I don't think it'll be much of a bombshell, because if it was, the Democrats wouldn't be bothering with all these investigations. They're expanding the investigations. They've subpoenaed 81 individuals. Why do that if Mueller's the man? And Mueller's going to come in and take down the president, his family, and anyone around him. I think Mueller's done. He's taken down Flynn, Cohen, and Manafort, and Papadopoulos, and not even Carter Page. So I think he's done. And now the Democrats realize, well, they put a lot of the eggs in the basket of trying to get rid of Trump. So I guess we're going to have to do this job on our own, even though Mueller wasn't able to do it. That's probably, again, bad strategy, because congressional investigations, they really have no bite. All they can do is make criminal referrals. But they had a special counsel, which was essentially a criminal referral. And if he doesn't come back with anything, it's really, I think, a waste of time to go through this process. That, in a sense, would be a witch hunt, because then what they're trying to do is they're searching for something that they can say, well, see, the special counsel missed this, we found it, aren't we heroes? We're going to turn this over back to the Department of Justice for a criminal referral. Now, I was also thinking, why everybody say, if Trump has all this information and knows a lot of stuff, why doesn't he declassify the documents that will show not only is he innocent, but that they actually concocted all this behind his back in an illicit and illegal manner? Now I realize it makes sense. Let the Mueller report come out, and if they want to go through everything in the Mueller report, they can very easily sit down, spend a couple of weeks, look at what the Mueller, no, it might even take that long, what the Mueller report says, and they can probably refute many of the things in that report by pulling stuff from the declassified documents, which would take a lot of the sting out of the Mueller report. I think that's probably, if the Mueller report is even remotely damning in any way, that's what they'll do. If it's not, they might not ever declassify those documents. And it's quite possible that the Mueller report might have, probably won't have anything exonerating the president. I think that'd be a bit much, even if they wanted to say something like that. Just like when they did the Inspector General's report, they came to a conclusion that there was no bias, but they gave all the information that showed that there was indeed bias. So you may get something like that. Whatever they show you is that they don't explicitly show you anything that shows any collusion, but there'll be no statement saying we didn't find any collusion. So I say best declassification used to be to compare it to any publicly released Mueller report findings. Now, you also know that they don't have anything when Nancy Pelosi comes out and says, oh, I don't think it would be worth it to impeach Donald Trump. Yeah, because you have to have a crime or a misdemeanor. And if you don't have one, then you look really foolish trying to evoke a process in the Constitution that requires a crime or a misdemeanor. And then she says, unless there's something so compelling. And that, I guess, is what the purpose of trying to do another congressional investigation is. Well, maybe we might come up with something. But I think she knows as of now they don't have a crime or a misdemeanor. And they're saying unless there's something so compelling, which means she's not anticipating the Mueller report to have anything compelling. Now, it's quite possible that the Mueller report has compelling evidence and actually wants to prosecute, wants to indict, in which case, well, then they'll be all over impeachment. For her to come out and say, no, we shouldn't bother with impeachment means we don't have anything to impeach him on. And again, she shouldn't be saying this. She should be waiting for the Mueller report to be conclusively either not having something to impeach him on, in which case then she can say it's not worth impeaching. But she shouldn't be saying this beforehand unless she's really sure that Mueller doesn't have anything. But again, it's possible he could have something, in which case she'll change her tune. All right. In other news, and then we'll wrap up with this. The story I've been talking about for 5 years, why the petrodollar is no longer relevant. The idea about the petrodollar is that all these countries needed to buy oil, and therefore, because Saudi Arabia agreed only to price their oil in dollars and would only sell their oil in dollars, that countries had to have dollars, and that's the petrodollar. Yes, indeed, that was true. That was the arrangement set up by Kissinger and Nixon in 1973, 1974, after Nixon took the world off the gold standard, and they had to come up with a way of making dollars still important because Europeans were saying to themselves, why do we need to transact in dollars if we can't get gold in exchange for them? Why don't we just trade in French francs, German marks, Italian lira, Spanish pesetas, etc.? So what this arrangement was the petrodollar, and this underpinned the dollar throughout the 70s. But as I've mentioned before, ever since then, the dollar has taken on a life of its own as a reserve currency, not just because countries needed to buy oil. Purchase of oil is about 8 to 12% of global commerce. Countries hold dollars now today in reserve, either in the form of dollars or treasury bonds, because they are a safe haven asset, they think, and they can hold on to them. They're liquid. And so the reason that countries hold dollars today isn't just to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, but that doesn't stop the end of the petrodollar, gold pumper nonsense, petro yuan, and all this other stuff. Then it's game over for the dollar if Saudi Arabia decides to take another currency other than the dollar. First of all, they're not going to do that. Why? Because the United States has a deal with Saudi Arabia. It may have been a little on the rocks for a while when Obama was president, because he was making overtures towards Iran during the Iran deal. Well, since Trump has come in and squashed the Iran deal, has put sanctions on Iran because Saudi Arabia and Iran hate each other. So now the United States has firmly got Saudi Arabia back on their side. Saudi Arabia has invested billions of dollars in Silicon Valley. Saudi Arabia also went through that Khashoggi nightmare where it looked like they had murdered the guy, and the United States, or at least the Trump administration, was, yeah, that's not too good, but this is an important relationship. So my point is that Saudi Arabia is not going anywhere on the United States. But even if they were, this is the point I made 4 or 5 years ago, the United States at some point was going to pass, if shale oil took off, Saudi Arabia in its oil production. They did that last year, but they did not pass Saudi Arabia in oil exports. Well, they did that this year, which means countries not only need dollars to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, but now they also need dollars to buy oil from the United States, the world's largest oil producer and exporter. So the idea of end of the petrodollar, dollar collapse, game over, game changer, gold 50,000, petro yuan, gold back yuan, all nonsense, totally outdated. No one manages to update their thinking and their analysis. They just keep repeating, end of the petrodollar, China is dumping treasuries, petro yuan. No, countries now need dollars more than ever, not only to buy petro from Saudi Arabia and the United States, they also have to buy natural gas and coal from the United States. They also fund all emerging markets, including China, fund all of their massive debt in dollars. So there's a real need for dollars. You may not like that. The United States owes a lot of money, but ever since the United States has done QE, the rest of the world has done more. European Central Bank has printed more money than the United States QE. They're now almost at $6 trillion. The U.S. only did $4 trillion in QE. China has printed 60% of the world's debt in the last 5 years. So, not that the United States has a sustainable debt load, but the rest of the world's are even higher. and the rest of the world needs dollars. They don't need the other currency, and they need dollars to buy oil, and they need dollars to pay off their debts. All right, let's see what you guys are saying in the comments section, if you're still there. Oh, yes, there we are. All right. What do we got? Let's see who we got. Seth Shepard is here. Hello. Hello. Bob is here. Hello, precious metal lovers. And you also have to say mug stackers and game changers. But yes, indeed, Bob, good to have you here. Financial Empowerment Movement. Good to be live for once. Always listening late at night or the next day. Well, it's good to have you live. Let's see if you got any comments tonight. Let's see. La Plata Pink. It's almost like they don't want Brexit to actually happen or something. That's absolutely true. La Plata Pink, you're absolutely right. They clearly don't want it to happen. I've been stacking silver for 8 years and 9 years and counting, says Seth Shepard. I have 50 ounces now. Well, that's a decent pile. 500, even better. That's like a monster box. I wish I had 5,000 ounces. All right. Student loans be killing me, Smalls. Yeah. And then, you know, the thing about student loans is you can't discharge them in bankruptcy. You got to hope that the Bernie Sanders thinks that the 1% got the money and the people with the student loan shouldn't have to pay because education should be free. That's what you're hoping for, right? All right. The globalists will always find their way, won't they, says La Plata Peak. Well, that's why they're called that, right? Randy, no, you don't, Seth. You won't have anywhere to sleep. Ha ha, Randy. All right. What are you talking about? Let's see. Randy, I love to know how much gold China really has. Well, I've done charts on that. This is another one of these gold pumper things that China and Sun Tzu, they make this big mystery. There's no mystery about China's gold. What they've done is they've conflated the People's Bank of China with China, okay? They don't do that with any other country. So the Reserve Bank of India, we saw on the chart. We're going to go here. We'll take a look at these charts. I'll walk you through it. This is no mystery. This is just gold pumper obfuscation and BS is really what it is. Let's take a look. Here are the gold reserves. The same, but there's no gold at Fort Knox. That's another. They just make that up. Just because they haven't audited it, they just assume that it isn't there because it fits their narrative. Okay. People's Bank of China, 1,874 tons. What is the People's Bank of China? It's the same thing as what the Reserve Bank of India is, 607 tons. It is the central bank of the country. Why anyone would think that an entire country would keep all of its gold at the central bank is not paying attention. The United States doesn't keep all of its gold at Fort Knox. It doesn't keep any of it it does keep some of it at the Federal Reserve, but it is not owned by the Federal Reserve. So, for example, the United States as a country, its gold is at Fort Knox, West Point, Denver, New York Fed. It's all over the place. It's not like half of it's at Fort Knox, 4,500 tons, I think. Okay, but 8,133 tons of gold is not all the gold in the United States by far. There's gold with investors, there's gold in funds, there's gold all over the place. Now, if you go down to China, 1,874 tons. Now, I do have a chart. I probably won't be able to find it while we're talking, but I'll walk you through it from memory. That's what the People's Bank of China has. Now, we know that China mines about 400 to 450 tons of gold every year, has done for the last 20 years. We know that China has mined over 5,000 tons. See, they're lying. No, they don't mine all the 5,000 tons and put it in the People's Bank of China. That should be obvious. We also have, from publicly available data, gold that goes into China from Hong Kong. We don't have data that where it goes into Shanghai or anywhere else. It's about 5,000 tons too in the last 10, 15 years. So already you're at 10,000 tons right there. But they're only showing 1,874. It's some kind of Sun Tzu deception. No, it's not. It means that they don't have the gold at the People's Bank of China. Now, because China is a communist country, technically anything that goes into the country belongs to the country. Well, I've answered that. Back when China first announced an update to its gold reserves back in 2015, after not announcing any gold reserves in 2009, there are all these gold pumpers. China's got 10,000, 20,000. They're going to shock the world, all this stuff. And when they only reported that they had 1,654 tons, they were like, they're lying, or it's Sun Tzu and appear to be weak when they're strong. No. What I showed, and Zero Hedge published the article, was that, I think it was called the case of China's missing gold, is that, yeah, the gold, there's gold in the country. 10,000, maybe 20,000 tons. It's just not all in the Central Bank of China's balance sheet. It is probably with other state-owned banks, other subsidiary banks of the People's Bank of China, whether wholly owned or partially owned, sovereign wealth funds, rich individuals, Shanghai Gold Exchange. So, of course, there's a lot more gold in China. It's no big mystery that there's at least 20,000 tons of gold in China. And if the Chinese government wanted to, it can confiscate it all and have it. And it's no mystery that there's about 20,000 tons worth of gold in India. But look at India. They only have 607. It must be some Hindu Siddhartha type deception. No. The central bank just doesn't hold all the nation's gold. We know there's about 4,000 tons of gold in Indian temples. And we know that because the Indian government tries to get them to loan it to the government to monetize it. And we know there's about 20,000 tons of gold in private Indian citizens' hands. So the idea that we need to know what China's gold is, no, we don't. It's not, oh, they're going to roll it out into a stadium and then say, where's yours? And then it's going to be game over. It's unbelievable what passes for analysis when they tell you this stuff. Anyway, those are your numbers there. Randy, how much cryptos they are buying? Who knows? I don't think they're probably buying any. But they could be buying some. Fiona Willie, it would be good talk about taxes someday. I just filed. Always got refund this year. Ended up owing $3,000. Have a small kid. Another one in college. Didn't claim any allowances. That's New York City for you. Yeah, I heard about the people who haven't gotten money back. That doesn't mean, and I don't know your circumstance, but in some cases that doesn't mean that you paid more tax this year. It just means maybe that the way they calculated your withholding, that you actually received more money during the year. You just didn't notice it, because it's not that much. And then when you had to pay at the end of the year, you thought, oh, this tax deal didn't work out for me. It may not have, but in many instances, people think it didn't work out for them when actually, if they were to calculate how much tax they paid on their salary this year versus the year before, that they actually did do better, even if they didn't get a tax refund. Some people also got from their employers bonuses at the beginning of January. And if they got those, they probably might owe tax on that as well. And they just assumed that was a free bonus and didn't realize they have to pay tax on it. Pablo, strange why China's not on the chart, just U.S. representing the West. Well, that's because Canada has no gold. They sold it all. Brown sold gold to Goldman Sachs. Canada has no gold, says Chris Clayton. That is correct. Wow, Lebanon has more gold than Canada. Lebanon has more gold than a lot of countries. Yeah, La Plata Peak. They can't even win gold hockey medals anymore. Ah, Tim Rabidou is here. How come you're not over with salivate medal? Yes, indeed. What is it? Nonetheless. Okay. Philip Quinn. Pablo, I might have gold. You probably do. If you have an ounce of gold, you have more. A tenth of an ounce, you have more than Canada. All is one is like number 6. I like you guys are keeping track there. It's good. La Plata Peak says kind of hard to have good cryptocurrency without electricity. Just saying. You know, that was my point. Is that's why I think it's possible. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but after Venezuela announces they're going to allow people to send cryptocurrencies, and we know that people are mining cryptocurrencies in Venezuela, and we know they have cheap electricity, that all of a sudden the electricity goes down. Wasn't that a kick in the head? All right. Blockstream is satellite, and says that yeah, there's also now they're saying you can do it over radio waves, but currently I would venture to guess 90-95% of the cryptocurrency mining and exchanges happen through electricity or electrical powered devices currently. So yes, there is a way to put the blockchain, they do have it on a satellite, but you still require energy to get there. Pablo says, here all the high earners are leaving New York City. Yeah, and I also saw something where they're trying to chase them down. You have to prove that you're not in New York City anymore and that you never come to New York City. They want to look at your phone records, and unbelievable. Philip Quinn, how come some states have no tax and others tax the hell out of you? That's a very interesting question, how that all emerged. I can only guess. I don't know the legislative history of all the 50 states. Some have tax, some don't. But remember, even if you don't have tax, then the property taxes are high. Because every government wants to provide, because people think, oh, I'm getting services, I'm getting fire, I'm getting police, I'm getting school, I'm getting social service, whatever it is, that that's a good thing. That's a good thing. The poor starve, and the rich eat all the food, and the poor starve to death. So lines for food are a good thing. I don't know how they come up with it, but you either pay property tax, you either pay sales tax, or you pay all of them. You pay income, sales, and property tax. Depends on what the state wants to provide in the way of services, and what the state wants to provide in the way of services generally determined by what the people want the state to provide to them. So it's amazing because generally people want the state to provide them as much as possible. So they end up having more taxes. But it is interesting that some states don't have the taxes. But it's generally the higher population states that have the tax. And maybe that's because they, in a way, somewhat have to bear a higher burden for social spending, because the more people you have in a city, the more likely that there's going to be pockets of poverty. People are going to need government programs, and where you may not have the same. That's where they congregate. They're not necessarily, like Wyoming is probably less tax heavy than New York State. But I don't really know. La Plata Peaks isn't a word, Philip. Federalism. Yeah, that would explain differences, yes, but it wouldn't explain why some have higher than others. It just explains why there's differences, and that was built into the Constitution, that you would have the so-called laboratories, the states as laboratories of democracy, and supposedly states would learn from one another what to do, what not to do, by testing things out, rather than this one-size-fits-all, which does make sense. Because one thing that doesn't make sense are the tax rates nationally. Because if you think about it, if you make $100,000 in Alabama or $100,000 in San Francisco, you pay the same tax. And you're rich on $100,000 for sure at Alabama. You're not really cutting it by much in San Francisco for $100,000. All right. Fiona William Pavel, my husband has plumbing company and license and valid in New York City only. Yeah, so you can't leave. And then every state has its own licensing and so on. Although, I mean, I don't know how the plumbing license work, but some of the different professional licenses, like teaching, can be transferred. Not very easily. You have to do extra work. Or law license is the same thing. I'm sure doctors have it. I'm sure that firemen and police, once you're in your area, you probably can't just stroll into another state and become a fireman or a policeman. Again, I don't know, but I know that every state has its own licensing laws. And that does prevent people from moving about unless there's reciprocity. But I would imagine that certain plumbing skills are transferable. It's probably not that you have to relearn everything to get a license. But I don't know, and I don't know what the costs are for transferring and trying to get a new license. All right, let's see what else we got here. La Plata Pink, I don't think it's possible to ascend the presidency without committing a white colony felony. Yeah, a lot of people don't know this, but like Truman was heavily, supposedly involved, or at least sponsored by a mob boss. I found out about that a few years ago. That's not like conspiracy. That's pretty much factual. John Kennedy's dad was in the mob. He was a bootlegger in the 60s. You move on from there. They call Tricky Dick. He was the next guy after Eisenhower. I don't think there was anything. Maybe there was. Well, he was in the army. That's not a homicide, but I guess he was involved in the killing of other people as a general. Yeah, you can go right down every president, and you can pretty much point out something in their past that it would appear unsavory. About the Clintons. About who else do we have as president? They say Jimmy Carter was not. He was honest Jimmy. Reagan, I'm not sure was involved in anything. Reagan or Carter, at least not that I know of. And then you had George Herbert Walker Bush was in the CIA, so take that for what it's worth. And then Clintons, and then who came after the Clintons? George Herbert Walker, George's son, so that's the whole Bush family. Obama, not sure he was involved in any specific that's out there common. And Trump, I guess they would say he was involved in kind of shady business deals and so on. Yeah, I mean it's hard. I would imagine to get to the top. I think there's Voltaire or one of the French writers said behind every fortune is a crime. So, all right, what else do we got? It's nice to surpass Saudi Arabia, says Shepherds. Yes. D.W. Philip Quinn, what is happening is people who have money are leaving the high tax states, move to lower tax states, then they vote to get all the stuff that raises taxes in new states. Well, that's what they say is happening in Texas. That they vote, they leave for that, and then they vote for the same thing they had. Seth is talking about Digibyte. Crypto Shrugged author is here. La Plata Pink is almost Saudi Arabia has something with the Fed. Yeah, they're pretty much tied together. Saudi Arabian deals with the U.S. They're big big buddies. All right, what else do we got? A lot of more questions here. I'll try to get to all of them here. Let's see. Wow, lots of questions here. Not questions, lots of. Like sometimes I have to go back and read them. I'm just gonna try to call anything that looks interesting here. Okay. And I sold Litecoin for Bitcoin. Okay. And you like to trade more than I do, says Seth. Jack, bottom or not, it seems to work in real life scenario. At least I bought some at a Bitcoin ATM and it was fast, 10 seconds. Huh. Yeah, there's now 4,435 Bitcoin ETFs in the world, about 2,700 in the United States. All right. Fiona Whalen, Americans probably have more gold in form of jewelry than any other nation. No, actually what I saw is it goes India, China, United States are the top 3 gold countries in terms of jewelry, but that there's big increases in jewelry demand for gold in Thailand. Yes. And that is one of my theories, that gold and silver aren't just a gloom and doom stack for the apocalypse metal. They're also a sign of wealth and good times, golden eras, right? Venezuela is not in a golden era right now. They're in a collapse. And in a collapse, your gold may be worth more, but there's not much to buy in a collapse. So I actually argue often that for gold and silver to rise, you actually want times to be better. People buying more gold and silver because they can afford it. Crypto Shrugged author John Moore is here. Good to see John. He's Mr. Litecoin, but he also supports Bitcoin. Chrono Trigger fan, that's India by far, Fiona. That is right, India. All right. Groups like the World Gold Council keep track of these numbers, Fiona. It's not even close. Yeah, if you go to the World Gold Council, they do have a lot of documents you can download and check out, and they give you the jewelry numbers, they give you the investment numbers. Central banks are buying gold. That's what you can find out. All right. Let's see if there's anything else. Lewis, if the taxes continue, it would be game over for my husband's business, and not for me, not for the dollar. Yeah, well, that's not good. But I would imagine. I mean, I don't know what New Jersey's like or Connecticut is like. Well, they're not better for taxes, that's for sure. But moving maybe to Pennsylvania, or then they'll track you down. I suppose. I don't know what to say. All right. Eisenhower, when head of the U.S. Army, denied housing and food for German POWs. There you go. Yep, tossing Molotovs. Yeah, so as I mentioned, when you're involved in war, it's kind of be hard to be a general and not be involved in some type of death, right? And they do say that the punishment of the Germans during World War II towards the end was very bad. Just the citizens, it was the guilty nation concept there. All right. I think that's about it. I want to thank everyone for joining me tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow night. And unless anyone else has anything in the next 10 seconds, I'm going to sign off and keep this under 1 hour, but we will see you back again tomorrow night. 10, 9, 8, 7, Yes, it was after the hostilities. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Buonanotte.